Welcome to my video on using the Plotter post-processing app to remove hidden lines. We'll be covering the Occult app today. So let's talk about what Occult is. Occult is a vPipe plugin, and that just means that it is not installed with vPipe by default, and you have to install it separately. I'm over here on the GitHub repository for Occult. And we're just going to kind of walk through what this does and what it is. If you need help installing, I have an installation video already up, so you can reference that. We have a link in the description. And Occult is used for removing hidden lines. In here, they say it's remove lines occulted by polygons. I think they might mean occluded, but basically, if you have lines that are hidden by enclosed shapes, you can remove those hidden lines or set them aside in a separate layer. So the drawing order matters. So here you see we have a line drawn and then a rectangle over the top of it. And using Occult, it removes that line from behind the rectangle. So perhaps you want to do something like this, riff on the Joy Division cover. And you've got these filled in shapes, and then when you go to actually plot it, you might get something more like this, where the fills are ignored and the plot still just draws each and every line. And that's rather frustrating. And perhaps you've been coming from using Inkscape, trying to understand, Boolean operations and kind of cutting these lines at the intersection points. And it's very manual, and you're just kind of thinking there's got to be a better way, and there is, and that's Occult. So we're going to use Occult today on this design and make sure that it looks the way we want it to before we plot it. In addition to that, just a quick shout out to NextDraw. Has a hidden line removal option as well, which you can use, and this is kind of just in the user manual here. So if you're using an AxiDraw machine and using the Inkscape NextDraw utility, this is an option for you. I will say this is not as flexible. It's not as powerful as Occult. One thing you have control over with Occult is you get to have the option of actually keeping the lines that you are removing. And why that's important is perhaps you don't want to just remove lines, but you actually want to apply kind of like a custom cutout shape and keep what's inside, what's being occluded, rather than everything else. And so there's options for that as well. So Occult is a little more powerful, but if all you're looking for is a very simple line removal, the NextDraw hidden line removal will do that for you in Inkscape. We're going to start off by using this Joy Division style design as our first example for using Occult. What's happening in this design is we are drawing lines from top to bottom. So if I shrink the number of lines here, you'll see if we go down to 1, we're drawing this line followed by this curve. And then what's happening off of the canvas, which means you can't actually see it here, is we are drawing a rectangle around and then closing this shape so that we can fill it in, and then we can occlude other lines like this. And so the drawing order matters, and the order that vPipe takes in the layers matters as well. So we're going to save this, and we are going to launch our terminal from where we have our Plotter post-processing application checked out. So we will see this here. So we want to make sure we're in the Plotter post-processing folder. I'm just going to say Python and main application.py. This is going to launch a file picker for us. We're going to just select the item we downloaded here, the Joy Division design. So what we have here is we have the Plotter post-processing application. And you can see in the terminal here, this is going to give you some kind of debug information. So it says the currently loaded files, and you can see that this is the one that we just selected. So we're going to launch Occult. And Occult launches in a separate window here. And basically, what this is going to be doing is this is going to be doing all of the hidden line removal operations. So let's jump into the folder where we got this. So I'm just going to leave everything here as the default, and I'm going to click Show Output. So this is the output from the vpipe show command. You can see, as I was talking about, we've got these rectangles that are getting kind of finished off screen here. But if we zoom in, it seems like it's doing exactly what we want. It seems like it's removing all the lines. One way we can just kind of be sure about that is if we click the Keep Occulted Lines, and that will keep it in a separate layer. And so you can see that this kind of reddish color here, if I get rid of layer 1, these are the hidden lines that it is removing. And that's pretty cool. It's a nice way to just kind of verify that that's working. So if I get rid of layer 2 and just look at layer 1, that's exactly what we want our design to look like. So what's happening here is that when I click Show Output or when I click Confirm, in the terminal window, you're going to get this kind of messy string of commands. And this is the vpipe commands that we are generating and then running. We'll get into, I guess, in an advanced section of this video, we're going to get into kind of what's actually happening here. But the good news is you don't really have to worry too much about this. So let's drop the Keep Occulted Lines, show the output one more time. So yes, this is what we want. We'll want to kind of crop these lines to the size of the design here, but that's something we can do in a separate step. But this all looks good. So when you click Show Output within the Plotter Post-Processing application, you will see this PPP, Plotter Post-Processing, temp folder. And this temp folder is created at the same directory as the file that you are reading in. And this is used, in the case of Occult, this is used for saving a version of the file that was just shown. So when you click Show Output, it actually saves a file here of this design. And why that's useful is because Occult can take a very long time to run depending on the number of lines that you need to remove. It's a very kind of CPU and time intensive operation to calculate all of the different intersections between lines and then remove them. So when it's done running and when we're showing it, I actually save a version of that to the temp folder. And that means that if I just click confirm here without changing any settings, the Plotter post-processing application will recognize that, oh, nothing's different. We just need to move this file here into the downloads folder here where we started from. So if I click confirm, or I close the show, if I click confirm, you'll see that the Plotter post-processing temp folder goes away, and the file itself, which is just the same name, but we append an _O for Occult, just shows up next to that file. So I don't overwrite any existing files by default, and so you'll end up with just kind of this string of different changes. So it's really easy to go back and actually examine the original file and then kind of every step of the way as you process things, and then only kind of delete them when you're done at the end. You'll also notice that in the terminal, we have now automatically selected the occulted file as the file we want to be working with. One of the things that Plotter post-processing does for you is that it always takes the output of the last step as your new input files to work with, but you can always change that by using the Reselect Files button. So in here, you could go back and reselect the original design if you wanted to, but by default, the one that we created here, the occulted version, is actually now our currently loaded file. Just a quick clarification on the files and overwriting files. Plotter post-processing will not hesitate to overwrite a file if it has the same name. So here you see we have a demo, and then we have an occulted version of that demo. And basically, if I go back and I select demo again, and I do another occult process, so you'll see this shows 1205 as the date modified. If I do the same occult process and I just hit confirm, it will overwrite that file without warning and without letting you know. So just so you're aware, the output from demo, if it's occulted, it's _O. If there's already a file that exists, it's going to be overwritten. The next example that we're going to be looking at is using multiple colors and multiple layers. So we're going to be using this design here. I call this shape spin. This is just a very kind of simple design of stacked polygons rotated on top of each other. So if you look at this, if I unfill these, you can see that the lines that are going to be hidden here, and then if I fill it back in, you can see where those kind of overlap and include each other. What makes this, I guess, different from the first example we looked at is that there's two colors, and not only that, the colors alternate here. So we've got yellow, we've got pink, pink, yellow, yellow, pink, yellow, yellow, pink, pink. And why that's important is because of the way that vpipe works and how layers work. So we're going to look at a little bit of in-depth stuff about layers here real quick, because this is very important to understand drawing order and how vpipe processes things. So I'm just going to save this SVG. We're going to reselect files. We're going to select our shape spin, and you can see that that's our currently loaded item. Let's launch Occult. So first of all, we're going to just leave everything by default. We're going to say show output. Perfect. That's exactly what we want it to look like. No issues. So one of the reasons that that works is because I'm using this attribute parsing -a d-a points. And this is creating essentially a new vpipe layer for every single shape. So that means that if I uncheck this reread parse file as a stroke and show output, what you can see here is we have 10 different layers. And if I get rid of layer 10, you'll see that it gets rid of the center polygon. And I'll just repeat that. 9, 8, 7, 6. So what's happening here is that each of these shapes, each of these polygons, is getting loaded into a separate file layer. So layer 1 is this first one that's drawn. And since that's drawn first in the SVG, that gets assigned to layer 1. vpipe creates layers starting at 1, not 0. So that's layer 1, layer 2, 3, 4, etc. Now, if I reread it and parse it as a stroke, what I'm doing here is I'm actually saving it as a file and then rereading it in vpipe, but parsing it as a stroke color. So now we have two different layers. We've got the pink layer, which is layer 2. We've got the yellow layer, which is layer 1. So what happens if instead of parsing it as D and points, what if you instead parse it as stroke from the beginning? What would happen? This is what would happen. And this is a very interesting output. This is not at all what we're looking for, right? We seem to be missing entire sections of, well, almost all of the yellow polygons. And the reason for that is because when vpipe creates layers, it will start with the first line drawn, and it will parse things by the attribute parsing that you set. So we, in this most recent example, grab this, we said -a stroke. So we're parsing by the attribute stroke. So the color, yellow, is getting put into layer 1. That's still layer 1. But what's happening is every time it encounters another yellow shape, it's also putting that into layer 1. And then all of the pink shapes are getting put into layer 2. And what Occult does, or Occult rather, it takes layer 2, puts it on top of layer 1, and says, are there any overlapping lines? And what happens there is that all of these yellow polygons are no longer in the order that they were drawn, and they are actually underneath all of these other pink polygons. And that is why you get this result instead of the one you want. So the order matters, and maintaining the drawing order matters. So if you have something, I call it interleaved colors, which means, again, we got yellow, pink, pink, yellow, pink, yellow, pink. That means that if you sort by stroke color, you're going to upset that drawing order and you're not going to get the occlusion and the hidden line removal that you are expecting to. Here is another example of how to use Occult. In this case, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking two separate color layers and occluding using the red shape over the top of these rings. And we're going to try to set aside what's kind of cut out from that shape in a separate file layer. So I'm going to save this, and we will reselect that, load it up, launch Occult, and what I'm going to do, I guess, to show you real quick is I'm going to uncheck the ignores layers, and I'm going to parse this by stroke, and I'm going to say Occult across layers, not within. So in this case, unlike the previous example, the red shape is on top of all of the other black lines, and so since there's no interleaved colors, I don't have to worry about it putting it in the wrong order. So the drawing order is going to be preserved even though we're using stroke in this case. So if I show this output, you'll see that we have this red shape, and this is removing all of the hidden lines behind it, which is almost what we want, but I want to kind of store those hidden lines in a separate layer. So Occult gives you this option, keep occulted lines, and if we show it now, you'll see we actually have a separate color and a separate kind of layer for the kept lines. So layer 1 is the black lines, layer 2 is red line, and layer 3 is pink lines. So what we have here and why it's pink colors is because I am assigning it a random color. And it's specifically, I'm assigning it a random color that does not exist in the SVG already. So there's no way they can accidentally be on the same stroke color layer if you read that in a second time. So basically all we're doing is it's the same operation, but instead of removing the lines, we're chopping them using this cutout shape, and then we're saving them in a separate layer, which means that I could, perhaps after this, I could get rid of this red shape here, and now I have just a 2-color plot here that I can do with 2 different pens in this kind of fun shape. So maybe next time we'll jump into using the decompose app in plotter post-processing to remove that red line. So I just want to reiterate that occlusion and running the Occult plugin can be very time and CPU intensive. Large files can take many minutes to process, and there's no progress bar or indicator to show how far along it is. In addition to that, the Occult app itself, when you're running something large and complex, it will actually show you this. Since the vpipe viewer is up, this is going to say not responding. So the reason that it's not responding is because the vpipe viewer is up, but this is how this would look if it was running a very long and complex occlusion and hidden line removal process. So if it says not responding, it might be that you are removing a ton of lines, and you might have to wait a while for it to actually fully process that. So just be aware that it can take a while, and just because it says it's not responding doesn't actually mean it's not responding. It's likely just that it's taking a long time to remove all of those lines. So another thing that you can do with the Plotter post-processing app is you can batch up files. So if I go here and I save this file, and maybe we randomize, say, this file and randomize. I liked that one. That one's fun. Let's make sure these are all filled in. Save that. That. So now we have 1, 2, 3. We've got 4 files here. So if I reselect files, and I just select all 4 of these files and click open, you'll see that we now have 4 different currently loaded files here in the terminal. So we will do Occult. We'll just leave all of these things as default, and I'm going to click show output. and it's just going to grab one of the files and do the occlusion process. And I think that looks great. That's exactly what we want that to look like. Perfect. We verified that that's going to work, and now I'm going to click, instead of apply here, now it says apply to all, because we're doing a batch operation. So I'm going to say apply to all. Now this might take a second, not too long, but you'll see here in our downloads folder, we now have 4 different files here, all with the -O appended on them, meaning that they were all occulted. So if I just open this Firefox, that's one of them. If I open this, that's another one. And so this is applying the same settings that you have in here and that we verified on the show step. We verified that it's correct. It's applying the same exact settings to all of them. So if you have a different type of file and you will need to do different type of occlusion, maybe you need to keep the lines or something, you should not batch that up with other ones, because this is just going to rerun the exact same thing for all of them. So that is how you can batch up multiple files and rerun just all of those same things on one. I had planned on trying to do a deep dive into the generated commands that the Occult app is giving us. I think it's getting a little too hairy. I think it's getting a little too complicated. There's a lot of advanced vpipe stuff going on here. If all you want to do is remove occluded lines, like you don't have to worry about this. So I think I'm going to save that for a separate video so that we can talk a little bit more in depth about different vpipe commands, how to kind of debug this, what the heck this gobbledygook is doing for us. So if that's of interest to you, let me know. I'll try to put together some advanced videos on kind of how to use vpipe and what's going on with these generated commands. So if you found this video useful, please consider supporting me over at Patreon. And next video, we'll be covering using the Decompose app, which is this one right here. Till next time, see ya.